Welcome to Hilary Topper on Air. Today, we're going to explore a pivotal moment in medical history and their lasting impact on our world today. We will be delving into the story of polio, a disease that once gripped the world with fear and has since become a symbol of the power of vaccines. We'll discuss the polio epidemic of the 1940s and 50s, the groundbreaking vaccines that led to its decline, the emergence of post-polio syndrome, and the current status of polio globally. In the mid-20th century, polio was a name that struck fear in the hearts of families worldwide. This highly infectious disease, caused by the polio virus, would often lead to paralysis and even death, predominantly affecting children. Mary McManus, author of A Most Unlikely Runner, Inspiration from the Heart of a Warrior, talks about her experience.
So when I contracted polio, I was 5.5 years old, and it was one of the last polio epidemics in the States, and it was in Westchester, New York. And I was playing the day before with my best friend, whose mother was not vaccinated, and we contracted polio on the same day. So I was running around the kindergarten gym like every other healthy kindergartner, and I literally dropped to the ground.
The epidemic of the 1940s and 50s were particularly severe, with thousands of cases reported annually in countries like the United States. Public pools were closed, and parents kept their children away from crowds, hoping to protect them from the invisible enemy.
I don't remember much after that except being at home, and I had a spinal tap because they suspected it was polio based on the clinical presentation. When they put my neck over the side of the bed, it was just stiff. And I was initially paralyzed from the neck down.
Were you hospitalized?
No, that's why I call myself one of the lucky ones. Even though later on, and we can talk about post-polio later, but even though in hindsight, my lungs were affected, I did not need an iron lung. And I did get some use back on my right side first. My left side stayed paralyzed much longer. But I did get some use back on the right side. And the March of Dimes came to my house, and I called whoever she was out there, or probably an angel right now, but she was an angel. And she put me lovingly on the floor, and she did an assessment and started the initial phase of physical therapy. And then my dad found one of the top polio experts in New York, Dr. Eugene Moskowitz, and his physical therapist, Miss Holly. And so probably in around September, I started going for physical therapy. And initially it was every day. And they used what's called the Sister Kenny method. And what the Sister Kenny method is, they take hot wool blankets and they put them on the legs, or whatever part is paralyzed. But in my case, it was, in fact, the legs. And they would, the physical therapist would coax the muscles and nerves back to health. First, the hot, wet wool blankets. And I must tell you, to this day, I can't wear wool. It was just really, really painful. But my physical therapist was amazing, and she had me read a Dr. Seuss book before every session. And then she'd have me recite back in tandem while I was on the treatment table. She was way ahead of her time as far as the mind-body connection goes. And so I was in physical therapy until I was 13 years old. And they wanted to make sure that I did not develop scoliosis, which I did not. I was in a leg brace for about a year and I was on crutches and I wore the red polio shoes that are actually in the Smithsonian as part of the exhibit about
Uh,
polio.
Reading about what happened during this time period reminds me of COVID-19. I talk about this topic because it actually affected me personally. You see, my mother, Phyllis Kahn Mass, was a polio victim. Her parents thought she got it from a public pool. She was the only one in her class to have it, and she was hospitalized for more than a year in an iron lung. For those of you unfamiliar with the term iron lung, it's a type of negative pressure ventilator, a mechanical respirator that was widely used in the mid 20th century, particularly during the polio epidemic. It was a large horizontal cylinder that encased most of the patient's body, leaving only the head exposed. The device worked by varying the air pressure inside the cylinder to stimulate breathing, effectively assisting patients who have lost control of their respiratory muscles due to the condition, like polio. The iron lung was invented by Philip Drinker and Louis Shaw in 1928 and became a crucial tool for treating respiratory failure caused by polio. During the polio outbreak of the 40s and 50s, iron lungs were common sights in hospitals, helping patients with paralyzed diaphragms breathe. Although largely obsolete today due to modern ventilators and near eradication of polio, the iron lung remains an iconic symbol of that era. I remember my grandmother telling me that she went to the hospital every day, but was unable to go near my mother because she had to wear some type of a hazmat suit in fear that she and my grandfather might contract the virus. My uncle was a little boy at the time and he stayed with various relatives. It was a very hard time for the whole family. It was just really, really difficult for them. And I can't even imagine having a child in the hospital for so long. That would have killed me. So just thinking about my grandmother dealing with that just was something. When my mother finally got out of the hospital and came home, all of her friends she once had were gone. They wanted nothing to do with her or her family. Everyone was a victim. A year or so later, they moved from the Bronx to Long Beach, Long Island. And that's where my mother ended up going to high school and then raising her family. In 1955, Dr. Jonas Salk developed the first effective polio vaccine. This injectable, inactive vaccine was a breakthrough in medical science, offering hope to millions. A few years later, Dr. Albert Sabin introduced an oral vaccine, which became widely used due to its ease of administration and its effectiveness. These vaccines drastically reduced polio cases in the United States and around the world. It turned the disease from a public health crisis into a manageable condition. I remember my mother telling me about the March of Dimes and how important they were during that time to her. The March of Dimes, originally known as the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, played a crucial role in the fight against polio. Founded by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1938, the organization was instrumental in funding research and supporting the development of polio vaccines. Through widespread fundraising efforts, including the famous March of Dimes campaign, the organization raised significant funds to support scientists like Dr. Jonas Salk, who developed the first effective polio vaccine. This vaccine, announced in 1955, led to a dramatic decline in polio cases and was a pivotal moment in public health history. The March of Dimes efforts not only helped eradicate polio in the United States, but also set the stage for its ongoing mission to improve health of mothers and babies. While the vaccines were successful in curbing new infections, many who survived polio were left with lasting effects. Decades later, these individuals began experiencing new symptoms, a condition known as Post-Polio Syndrome, or PPS. PPS manifests as muscle weakness, fatigue, and joint pain, occurring years after the initial recovery from polio. It is believed to result from gradual deterioration of the motor neurons that were previously damaged and then repaired during the original polio infection. Tell me about how you discovered that you got post-polio.
Mm. So I was actually not feeling well for about 10 years. I just kind of soldiered on. I was a type A personality. I was working as a VA social worker. I was raising my twins, running the household. But little by little, my functioning started to decline. The limp came back from polio. I was in chronic pain. And I was anxious and depressed because I didn't know what was happening in my body. And little by little, I was getting more and more tired. I was in what's called adrenal overload. So I kept pushing myself through the fatigue and through the pain. And so I would be like a hamster in a wheel, and I wasn't resting well at night. And finally, after 10 years, I said, okay, something's not right here. My primary care provider said that it was psychiatric, and I am a trauma survivor. So, I knew that, trauma played a role in it, but I knew there was something physically wrong that had to be attended to. And so one day in October, now 2006, in 2006, I finally got to the point where I said, I have to do something. I mean, I didn't know if I was having a stroke. I didn't know what these symptoms were. And I was still seeing patients. And in between patients, I would say, well, the sensations passed, so nothing too untoward is happening to me. So finally, I Googled post-polio syndrome. And the way that I knew about it was I had a surgeon who did reconstructive leg surgery. And he actually had a polio patient. And being the social worker and the consummate giver and lack of self-care at the time, I'm sure you can relate to that, Hilary. He called me into the office when I was there for my post-op visit of all things and said, I need your help with Mrs. G. She needs surgery, but her husband's a veteran and he needs care. So what can we do here? So I'm there on my crutches, there with my having post-reconstructive leg surgery. But the blessing in all of that was that he told me she had post-polio syndrome. Had I not had that encounter, I'm not sure I would have known it even existed. So I made that call. Isn't that something? So I made that call to the post-polio clinic, and I talked with this angel, Anna Rubin, and she said, well, certainly based on your history, based on your symptoms, I think it is. So she sent me a book by Dr. Julie Silver called Post-Polio Syndrome. They sent me a packet that was so thick to fill out all these forms. And the first thing they had to do was rule out any other medical condition, because post-polio syndrome is a diagnosis that is a rule out. And so I had extensive testing done. I also had muscle function testing done. Um, Fortunately, my upper body did not show any untoward effects of the polio virus, but my legs did. And the only abnormal blood test that came back was a muscle function test, a blood test. And so they made the diagnosis and they told me to prepare to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, that it was a progressive neuromuscular disease, that I might need a sleep apnea machine because they weren't sure if I was getting enough oxygen at night. My speech and swallow function was compromised. So I saw a speech and language pathologist, and she said, the left side of your esophagus is very sluggish. And she said, be prepared. You might need a feeding tube one day. And on it went. I went to the brace clinic. They put me in a toe-up leg brace with a cane. I saw an OT for energy conservation. And I just want to say, initially, this was great. I mean, it basically said, take a pause. You need to treat your body well, and you need help, which is true. Fortunately, the physiatrist that I saw, in addition to the doom and gloom, he did find that I had a disc pressing on a nerve in my neck, which was responsible for some of the symptoms. So he referred me to a pain management doctor who I call my master magician, and I got trigger injections. And it was the first time that I realized, wait, I can get pain relief? This is amazing. And he referred me to a physical therapist. I left the clinic, the Framingham clinic, where it was all doom and gloom, and God bless them. They do the best with what they know at the time. And I went to the clinic near my office, and I met another angel, a physical therapist, and she said, you know what? You are not destined to live the rest of your life in a wheelchair. You have a disconnected mind-body connection. And we've got to make that connection, and we're going to get you stronger, and we're going to figure out a way to get your quality of life back. And they did tell me I needed to quit my job because the stress was making the symptoms worse. And the PT showed me on a biofeedback machine that that was the case. But I worked with her from January till May, and she left Spalding to go be a traveling PT, and I left my job. And then I started my life really over again.
So how are you feeling today?
Oh, I'm going to be 71 on Christmas, and I feel younger today than I did back then. I became what I like to say most unlikely runner. Went on to run the Boston Marathon and a whole host of other adventures as I like to say, a runner girl. I feel so blessed. And Hilary, when I read about your mom's journey with post polio in your book, I just took a deep breath and I said, my goodness, I'm really blessed. I really am one of the lucky ones because, I did want to go speak at a post polio group, a support group, to share my story of hope. And Hilary, they didn't want to hear it. Um,
Wow.
yeah, it was just truly amazing to me. So I feel so fortunate. And every day, I'm like in constant rehab. Like I'm always being mindful of how I'm moving. I use conscious movement. I use meditation. I make sure that I'm exhibiting really good self-care. I do strength training and make sure I take my rest days. But I feel amazing and so fortunate.
Mary was one of the lucky ones, but not everyone was so lucky. Although polio has been nearly eradicated, thanks to the continued effort of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which began in 1988, through comprehensive immunization campaigns, polio remains epidemics in only very few regions. However, vigilance is key, as outbreaks can occur if vaccination efforts wane. The fight against polio continues with a focus on reaching every child to ensure a world free from the disease. The disease, unfortunately, still affects those who were victims in their childhood. Although their symptoms improved and many were released from the hospital, when they reached middle age, the symptoms returned as post-polio syndrome. Post-polio syndrome is a condition that can develop many years after a person has received polio. It's estimated that a significant number of polio survivors experience post-polio syndrome, where they encounter new symptoms such as muscle weakness, fatigue, and joint pain. This syndrome arises because the motor neurons that were once damaged and adapted to regain function gradually deteriorate over time. This deterioration leads to the resurrection of symptoms, often affecting mobility and quality of life. For those living with post-polio syndrome, daily life can present a series of challenges. The renewed muscle weakness and fatigue can make simple tasks daunting, often requiring changes in lifestyle, sometimes necessitating assisted devices. Many find themselves facing a slow decline in physical capabilities, compounded by the emotional and psychological impact of reliving the aspects of a disease they thought they have overcome. After a fall down a flight of stairs, my mom's polio returned as post-polio syndrome. I think that fall just clicked it on for some reason. It was there, it was always there, it was always coming back, but it just accelerated it. When I was a child, I remember my mom was always sick. She was constantly in bed, and I really never understood why. As she got older, it got worse. She eventually lost the ability to write, to walk, and eventually she died of the disease when she was only 72. My mom was in a scooter. She couldn't get out of the scooter. She had so much trouble getting even up from a toilet seat. It was that difficult for her. And when I look back on her life, I realized that she had such a rough life. And I feel so much for her. I really do. At the time, when I was growing up, I couldn't understand why she was the way she was. But now, as I'm older, I definitely understand. Understanding and managing post-polio syndrome involves a multifaceted approach. While there's no cure, strategies include energy conservation, tailored physical therapy, and the use of assisted devices to maintain independence. It's crucial for individuals with post-polio syndrome to avoid overexertion to prevent further nerve damage. Medical professionals focus on helping these patients adapt their routine and maintain their quality of life as best as possible. Raising awareness about post-polio syndrome is vital. Many survivors are unaware that their ongoing symptoms could be related to their past polio infection. Increased support and understanding from the community can make a significant difference in the lives of those affected, offering them the resources and empathy they need. As we reflect on the history of polio, we see a powerful example of how science and global cooperation can overcome even the most daunting challenges. The story of polio reminds us of the importance of vaccines and the need to protect our progress against infectious diseases. As we reflect on the history of polio, we see a powerful example of how science and global cooperation can overcome even the most daunting challenges. The story of polio reminds us of the importance of vaccines and the need to protect our progress against infectious disease. Hopefully, one day soon, the government or some independent researcher will come up with a cure for post-polio, and those who are inflicted will recover. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of polio. If you want more information on this podcast or any other podcast, visit us at hilarytopper.com or atriathletesdiary.com, or you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Alexa, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. Until next time. This show was produced by Hilary Topper and sponsored by the Russo Law Group, Long Island's signature elder law, estate planning, and special needs law firm. For more information, contact vjrussolaw.com. It was also sponsored by Try. It was also sponsored by Try. This show was produced by Hilary Topper and sponsored by the Russo Law Group, Long Island's signature elder law, estate planning, and special needs law firm. For more information, visit vjrussolaw.com. Also, Vimazi, the shoes I love to train in. Go to Vimazi, VIMAZI.com, and check out my website at atriathletesdiary.com for a special discount code of 25% off of all Vimazi products. Also, Metadyne. It's an incredible company for all your injury prevention and pain relief products. I have a discount code of 20% off of them as well. You can go to metadyne.com for more information, or again, you can go to my website at atriathletesdiary.com/discounts to get a discount for any and all Metadyne products. And Try, your multi-sport specialist for all your triathlon needs. They have so many opportunities, including franchising. If you love the sport of triathlon, check out playtry.com and learn more about opportunities, or if you want to shop there, check them out. They've got great prices and they've got amazing customer service.